2 weeks into the war in Ukraine, we now fully understand the Biden administration's organizing principle. Do not provoke Putin. Quite simply, there is no other explanation for America's foreign policy other than that. And let's see where that policy has gotten us. Today, the Russian military bombed a maternity and children's hospital in the southern city of Mariupol. That's the last Ukrainian holdout on the southeast coast. The barbarity of that act is truly unthinkable. It serves no military value. It is simply a way to crush a civilian population's will to fight. The Russian military knows it can't win a fair fight, so it bombs kids, and it bombs pregnant women. This is one of the patients being brought out on a stretcher. Another expecting mother walking down in her blood-soaked clothing. Vladimir Putin does not view this as a military failure. He views it as a military success. Here's the mayor of the town Putin wants to surrender.
We cannot imagine how it's possible in 21st century to kill civil infrastructure, to kill civil citizens as much as possible. I cannot realize and understand this.
It is possible because the world, and more importantly, the United States, which leads the free world, has yet to extract a price from Putin that will stop him. This should not come as a surprise, nor is it partisan. Putin did this in Chechnya and the Republic of Georgia during George W. Bush's presidency. He did it in Syria during President Obama and President Trump's terms. Putin doesn't fear U.S. presidents because he knows they fear him. Putin now controls at least 3 of Ukraine's nuclear power plants. His forces shelled 2 of them. Now the power is out at Chernobyl. So in addition to threatening nuclear war, Putin has figured out a way to blackmail Europe with nuclear fallout without actually launching a bomb. Plus, we've learned Vladimir Putin continues to use vacuum bombs against civilian populations. They spray a fine mist of explosive liquid before a smaller charge detonates. That creates a blast wave which collapses people's lungs within a few hundred yards or farther, depending on the size of the weapon, of the explosion. For all the talk of sanctions, for all the sanctions that have been put on Vladimir Putin, not to mention the rising price of gas and everything else in America that our citizens, you, me, and every other American are paying to punish Vladimir Putin, not to mention the billions in military aid to Ukraine and all the flowery statements and condemnations, it has made a lick of difference to Vladimir Putin. There is so much more that we could be but are not doing. We didn't send Harpoon anti-ship missiles. Those would have kept Russians from carrying out amphibious attacks and possibly would have kept them from Mariupol, where they bombed the hospital. We didn't send advanced air defense missile systems to protect civilian targets. We didn't send encrypted communication devices. And we didn't send fighter planes. All, and they will say this, because the White House is scared of provoking Putin. And there is reason to believe that a lot of sanctions that we and our allies could put on Vladimir Putin are not being done for the very same reason. All right, the Ukrainians want a no-fly zone. They still do. That's off the table. As we discussed, that is a road to World War III. But how about this? The Ukrainians wanted extra fighter planes for their pilots to fly from Ukrainian bases. Poland has extras of those jets, MiG-29s from the Soviet era. It's the same kind of plane as Ukraine has. Poland offered to give them to the Ukrainians. On Sunday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken seemingly was all in on this plan.
If, for instance, the Polish government, a NATO member, wants to send fighter jets, does that get a green light from the U.S., or are you afraid that that will escalate tension?
No, that gets a green light. In fact, we're talking with our Polish friends right now.
All right, that was Sunday, roughly 80 hours ago, maybe a little more. Since then, the Poles said, yes, we will give the planes to the United States Air Force in Europe, who will then give the planes to the Ukrainians. As we said, 80 hours, which for the Ukrainians is a long time. They are getting bombed and shelled into submission. In those 80 hours, the winds in Washington shifted again, and the White House killed the plan. Here, 80 hours later, is the Pentagon spokesman.
The intelligence community has assessed that the transfer of MiG-29s to Ukraine may be mistaken as escalatory and could result in a significant Russian reaction that might increase the prospects of a military escalation with NATO. Therefore, we also assess the transfer of the MiG-29s to Ukraine to be high risk.
So in 80 hours, we went from a green light to it's too risky. It would be impossible to screw up the messaging in a worse way. Putin is sly like a fox. He knows Western sensibilities and he knows how to manipulate them. The KGB trained him to do that. Imagine his glee in hearing, and we are quoting now, "We assess the transfer to be high risk." Putin won by default. So he's gotten away with bombing a children's hospital, and the world basically does nothing. He shelled nuclear power plants and can now blackmail Europe with a nuclear meltdown. Why would he stop? And the White House does not think he will. Russia claimed the United States supplied the Ukrainians with chemical and biological weapons. They did that today. Here's the White House statement in response. Now that Russia has made these false claims and China has seemingly endorsed this propaganda, we should all be on the lookout for Russia to possibly use chemical or biological weapons in Ukraine or to create a false flag operation using them. It's a clear pattern. Indeed, Jen Psaki is correct. The pattern is very clear. Vladimir Putin knows that the more depraved his actions, the crueler he is, the more the West, and specifically the United States, does everything possible, as they have said, not to provoke him. There are a few men who better understand Putin and his motivations than retired Brigadier General Peter Zwack. He spent years in Moscow as the U.S. Defense Attache. Larry Pfeiffer, former chief of staff at the Central Intelligence Agency, now a strategic advisor at the Chertoff Group. Gentlemen, good to see you. Larry, from an intelligence standpoint, how close am I to the way Vladimir Putin thinks and sees American actions?
Well, Leland, you're very close. Vladimir Putin follows the old Russian model that you take the bayonet, you stick it in. If you keep feeling softness, you just keep pushing. You have to feel steel for them to withdraw that bayonet. So we're seeing him perceiving the West as being weak enough to allow him to continue to do the horrible war crimes that he's doing.
Hey, General, you've been spot on so long on this issue. The Ukrainians now are talking about concessions to Vladimir Putin. They say they may not have to join NATO. They may give him some of the areas, Crimea and areas in the east that he wants. Is there any reason for Vladimir Putin to stop right now?
I don't think so. It looks like that he's still pressing a maximalist approach, which would mean the seizure, the conquering, if you will, of Kyiv, the capital, and in sense, as such, what he would perceive the submission of the Ukrainian people, which struggle will go on. I think that I can't speak for the Ukrainians and their public negotiating position. There is a dialogue, but in my gut, I believe that they absolutely, certainly under the coercion and viciousness, not accede to his demands on both Donbass and Crimea, and, if you will, aspects of Ukrainian sovereignty and how they do their foreign policy. I'll say one other thing. I think the longer this goes on in Ukraine, while we see the brute force strength more and more with the Russians, with that, the indiscriminate shelling, the longer it goes, time is not actually on Vladimir Putin's side, as we're beginning to see the ripples and tremors inside Russia.
Yeah, no, and you've spent a long time there, so that speaks volumes. Larry, how good are we to believe U.S. intelligence and understanding of Vladimir Putin and his inner circle is right now? How clear-eyed are we on what so many people would love to see, which is a coup?
Well, U.S. intelligence on, Russia's always been considered a hard target. That being said, the U.S. intelligence community has been very accurate about how this invasion was going to roll out. With regards to that inner circle, you heard Director Burns yesterday in testimony on the Hill testify that Putin is frustrated and angry. And a frustrated and angry Vladimir Putin is likely to lash out. So there may be some individuals immediately around him who may be removed from office, removed from power. But at some point, Vladimir Putin ultimately wants to remain in power, and he will not do anything that will risk his remaining in power.
General, we keep hearing everyone talk about war crimes, war crimes, war crimes. The justice given to former Russian presidents or people who fall out of favor with the Kremlin is far more severe and indelicate, shall we say, than any trial at The Hague. Does that talk mean anything to the Russian generals and the professional soldiers that you used to liaison with in Russia? Do they take these warnings seriously, or do they not care and keep bombing kids?
It's a great question, they're tough guys, but in their own minds, they are Russian patriots, and right now they are following orders. I've got to believe, as the carnage continues and they're beginning to get reports from their subordinates all the way down to the young conscripts that are really bearing the brunt of a growing, if you will, hornet's nest of out in the countryside and city Ukrainian. I've got to believe some of them quietly and more so are beginning to have their doubts. This is ugly for them. The whole war crime label, the whole brute force aspect of it forces more artillery, which forces more war crimes, and the whole world, including media, is watching.
Yeah, you just hope that there is somebody, if they order a chemical or biological attack, that's willing to say no. But so far, we have not heard of any real revolt. Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.